Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Daily Arsenal Podcast, brought to you as part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. It is Wednesday today on the Daily Arsenal Podcast, and today we're going to have a little look at Europe, seeing as Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League football is back this week. And it is, in fact, this evening that Arsenal play at home against Dinamo Zagreb in their 7th Champions League game of the season. So, what we want to do is have a little look at Dinamo Zagreb, our upcoming opponents, where they sit in their league, where they sit in the Champions League, their top goal scorer, and have a little bit of a discussion about sort of the dangers they pose. Then I'm going to quickly talk about potential ambitions for Europe, and then we're going to look at the other leagues around Europe as well. So sort of Serie, Bundesliga, and La Liga in particular. So I'm your host, Josh Vince. It's going to be a slightly shorter episode today, just because schedules with everybody are incredibly tight, considering that it's January at the moment. And unfortunately, Joshua Duncan's audio wasn't quite working for this recording. So he will be back, just not going to be in this particular podcast. So, Dinamo Zagreb. What can I tell you about Dinamo Zagreb? They are a Croatian team. They're currently third in their league with one win in the last 5 domestic league games. So they're going through a little bit of a tricky spell at the moment. They're normally sort of right towards the top of the Croatian league, but they've had a little bit of an up and down season so far. But, I mean, one thing that you have to give them and you have to say is that they are in the Champions League, and no team in the Champions League is a pushover except for Young Boys. Sorry, Young Boys. I don't think there's any Young Boys fans that listen to this podcast anyway, so we should be fine insulting them. So they're in the Champions League, so you can never write them off as a bad team. I mean, even in the Europa League, teams, I'd say 80% of the teams are very, very competitive teams. So it's never going to be an easy game in a Champions League. It's never going to be simple, dry cut, clear cut, anything like that. In regards to the Champions League, just a quick sort of recap on the way that it works, because it's been a little while since we talked about it, and for those who might not be familiar with European football, it is a brand new system. So there's 36 teams in a league table, one big league table. Those who finish between 1st and 8th automatically qualify for the round of 16. So that's the first knockout round. Those in between 9th and 24th will play a playoff leg. So 9th will get drawn against 24th, 10th against 23rd, 11th against 22nd, and so on and so forth. And they will play a playoff. So they will play a 2-legged fixture, and whoever wins that will then go on to the round of 16. And then any teams from 25th and under, down to 36, will not progress in the Champions League. And I quite like it. I think it's been rather dynamic. Rather than having a group stage where there's, 4 teams who play 2 legs against each other, and it's just, it's the best of that. I find that a little bit stale, whereas this has been, each team plays 8 games in the Champions League. I know it's more games, and we were a little bit worried about that at the start of the season. But it's kept it fresh, and it means that teams like Leverkusen, who, have been good domestically, but you wouldn't put as being brilliant in Europe, have been in the top 8. Villa in the top 8. Brest and Lille are in the top 8 as well. 2 French teams doing really, really well. And then the likes of Atleti, Madrid, Man City struggling a little bit, including especially PSG. And Dinamo Zagreb, our upcoming opponents from Croatia, they are 24th in this league table, which means that they are right on the cusp of not going any further in this competition. The team underneath them, by the way, Paris Saint-Germain, the best team in France, or so they like to consider themselves. They actually play Manchester City so I'm recording this on Sunday. I think they play Manchester City on Tuesday or Wednesday. So that should be a really, really interesting game. And, as much as I don't like watching City win, particularly, they play on Wednesday, they play tonight. As much as I don't like seeing City win, it would be really, really funny if PSG don't go any further in the competition. So Dinamo Zagreb have a lot to play for. 1 point against dropping out of the competition entirely. They've got 2 losses, 2 draws, and 2 wins. But it is worth bearing in mind that their 2 victories were in fact against Slovan Bratislava and Red Bull Leipzig. Now, both of those teams have something in common. They're sat right at the bottom of the Champions League table. They are out, effectively, of the Champions League with 0 wins in 6. They have lost 6 games each. So the 2 teams that Zagreb have managed to beat are the ones who are, quite frankly, the worst in the competition. I mean, they haven't won a game. Obviously, they're the worst in the competition. And in technical terms, they can't qualify because its 8th is currently the 24th, and they have 0 points. And they would get 6 from 2 wins if they were to win 2 games. So they can't qualify. So Zagreb need to come out and show a good performance against Arsenal. And Arsenal at home, you'd think, a big advantage. But, I mean, Manchester United played poorly. Aston Villa weren't fantastic either. So we can't get too excited. But realistically, there is a bit of hope in the sense that Zagreb have not been brilliant in Europe. They've had a couple of decent results, but their 2 big wins against the 2 teams who haven't won a single game means that there's probably something to cling on to. Their main threat, really, is their top goal scorer currently, and that is Sandro Klenovic. Now, he's a 25-year-old Croatian, and there's a little bit of argument about who he was going to play for. I think there's some controversy that he might choose to play for Bosnia and Herzegovina. But because obviously it's ex-Yugoslavian state, it's very diplomatically complicated. But he's come out and said he's going to play for Croatia. He's got 11 goals in all competitions so far, and he's been described as the new Mario Mandzukic. So Mario Mandzukic, obviously, for those who are sort of, under the age of 20, might not be as familiar. He was a fantastic number 9. Really strong, really pacey. Played at all levels of the game. He scored a bicycle kick against Real Madrid in the Champions League final for Juve just before Cristiano Ronaldo basically said, hold my beer, and did it better. And then Real Madrid obviously went to go on and win that game. He is a very, very good player, and he bases his game off Fernando Torres, operating with speed and power above anything else. So he's probably the biggest concern that Arsenal will have, especially if Saliba is injured as long as he apparently is going to be. Like, Arteta seems quite concerned about William Saliba at the moment, which is something we definitely need to worry about. But yeah, so that's probably their big threat. Realistically, though, when it comes to Dinamo Zagreb, I don't think Arsenal have too much to worry about. I think we should be able to dispatch them. I could see Arteta maybe even rotating things a little bit to try and keep things fresh in the league, because we're in a very comfortable position at the moment, Arsenal. We're going to get onto that into the second section, but we're in a good position currently in the Champions League. So there is probably an opportunity to rotate against a slightly weaker European side. So I'm going to give my prediction for that one as a 3-1. Should I go 3-0? If Saliba's playing 3-0, but if he's still injured, I'm going to say 3-1. I think Arsenal will win convincingly, and it'll be a nice, comfortable game. Anyway, that's it for the first section, looking at Dinamo Zagreb. When we come back in part 2, I'm going to talk about our potential ambitions for Europe and what we should be aiming for. So we'll be back just after this message from Zencastr. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spend a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. And welcome back to the Daily Arsenal podcast. We're talking about the Champions League and Europe in general. We've had a little look at Dinamo Zagreb, sort of our opponents coming up this evening. And then after that, we only have one more nailed-on fixture in the Champions League. I mean, we're definitely going to go through to the next stage, whether it be in the playoffs or automatic qualification is yet to be seen. I'd be amazed if we don't automatically qualify, because after Dinamo Zagreb, our next opponent will be Girona. Now, Dinamo Zagreb are in 24th in the Champions League table. Girona currently 30th, with only 1 win. Now, this is something that Girona and Dinamo Zagreb have in common. They've both beaten Slovan Bratislava. So again, when it comes down to, we'll do more of a deep dive on that next week. But when it comes to playing against Girona, I'm not worried. Like, I can see us getting 6 points out of those 2 games, which brings us on to the next point. Arsenal in Europe. In terms of like where we stand right now, we are 3rd in the Champions League table. We're 3rd in the Champions League table, which I still find kind of baffling. It is worth mentioning, however, that 3rd to 8th, so the automatic qualifying points, are all on 13 points. So Arsenal, Bayern Leverkusen, Aston Villa, Inter Milan, Brest and Lille are all on 13 points. So, we're doing well, but there's also a lot of teams who are doing well. And then when it comes to the drop into the playoff zone, Dortmund, Munich, Atleti, AC Milan have 12, Atalanta, Juve have 11, Benfica, Monaco, Sporting, Feyenoord and Club Brugge has 10. So between 3rd place and 19th place, there are 3 points. So can't get too ahead of ourselves. However, Dinamo Zagreb and Girona as our last 2 games, I think are very, very favourable. I can see us getting 6 points. To be honest, I think a win would see us through to automatic promotion, which is what we want. We do not want to be in the playoffs. I would rather be knocked out realistically than go to the playoffs, because it's an extra 2 games against a European side, which means travelling in... No, I wouldn't rather us knocked out, but I really don't want us to have to do an extra 2-legged round in the Champions League. It's actually quite interesting in the sense of the Champions League when the knockout round starts. So the playoff round starts in mid-February for those teams who finish between 9th and 24th. However, if we were to finish in the top 8, the next Champions League game that we would have would be on the week of the 4th and the 5th of March. Now, that's quite a bit of time to rest, recover, just playing Premier League games, because we're out of both domestic cups at the moment, but also around about the time that a certain Bukayo Saka should be coming back. So if we could then maybe make a run in the Champions League with Bukayo, that would be lovely. So I can see us finishing inside the top 8 and then not having to play any more European football till the start of March, which would, I think, be the absolute best. Well, I mean, it would be the best case scenario anyway, regardless. But it's kind of a must scenario for Arsenal at the moment, with the amount of injuries that we seem to be picking up. If we can get back to having a full fit team for the Champions League, that would be brilliant. Because, as I said a moment ago, we're out of both domestic cups, which is not good. It's not a good look for Arsenal, especially, kings of the FA Cup and all of that. Oh, that made a nice ring. Sorry about that. And the Premier League, we talked about it on Monday, is looking less and less likely that we'll catch Liverpool, and in some ways as well, it looks kind of unlikely that we're even going to be second. Like, there are teams, Forest are going to be vying for second, City are definitely going to be coming back now as well. They're going to find a groove and start winning games. I've spoken to City fans who reckon they're going to finish second above us. So, it's the Premier League is going to be incredibly difficult. Is there more hope for silverware in Europe? I had a feeling at the start of this year we were going to have a good Champions League run. I don't know why. I didn't think we were going to win the league, but I thought we'd have a really, really good Champions League run. And if we can, and I mean, I'm not a religious man, but goodness me, if we made the final, that would be an incredible achievement for this Arsenal side. If we won it, I'm not sure what I would do, quite frankly. I don't know if I'd have the sort of capabilities to comprehend or properly experience that moment. But yeah, Champions League silverware could potentially be more attainable than Premier League. But that's a huge jump. We still got to get through these 2 games. In terms of who I think will finish in the top 8, with 2 games left, Liverpool definitely will. I mean, it's nailed on already. Unless they have an absolute shocker and lose the next 2 games by, several goals, and then everyone in the top 8 who's currently there wins, and Dortmund, Munich, and Atletico Madrid do, and win well, then Liverpool could potentially not finish in the top 8. But they're going to. They're going to finish in the top 8. Barcelona are hitting a rough patch of form at the moment, but they have 15 points. They're 3 above 9th place, so they can afford to lose a game. I think they'll be in there. I think we will stay there. Inter Milan will stay there. I have a feeling that Bayern Munich are going to sneak in. And I also have a feeling where City have 8 points. So they're 5 off of it. I don't think City will make the top 8. I'm going to say Liverpool, Barcelona, Arsenal, Leverkusen, Inter Milan, Brest, Villa, and Bayern Munich. That's going to be my top 8. I mean, I'm awful when it comes to predictions. We all know this on the Daily Arsenal podcast, but that's my prediction. Anyway, we're going to stop now with the Champions League. We're going to take a little break, hear a message from our partners at the Global Sports Podcast Network. And when we come back, we're going to have just a very, very brief look at the leagues in Europe and how they're shaping up at the moment, because some of them have been fascinating. So we'll be back just after this message.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football, and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day.
And welcome back to the final part of this Wildcard Wednesday episode. I'm your host, Josh Vince. We've had a little look at Dinamo Zagreb, our opponents tonight, and sort of potential ambitions that Arsenal can have for Europe. But now it's time to look at the other leagues around the continent. Starting off with Serie A. Now, Serie A has been my favourite league to dip in and out of over the course of this season because it has been chaos. It's been pure chaotic energy, and I love that. Also, my manager at work is a Juve fan. He's Italian, so I naturally get told a lot about what's going on in Serie A as well. Last time I think we spoke to you, Atalanta were riding high in first place. That has all changed now. Napoli have found an incredibly rich vein of form. They've just sold Kvaratskhelia, of course, to Paris Saint-Germain, but they've hit a really good run of form. They played 21 games, won 16. They have 50 points currently, which is a remarkable record for 21 games played. It's a really, really good setting that they're setting themselves on. Inter Milan are second. They have a game in hand as well on 45, and then Atalanta sit in third with 43. I think the big surprise is that Fiorentina have massively dropped off. Fiorentina were the surprise package. They were the surprise package this season. They were sitting in second for a considerable amount of time, but are now dropped off into sixth. And I'm looking at their form right now, going backwards from their most recent game. Draw, loss, loss, draw, loss, loss. It does not look good because I don't think they'd lost... I think they'd lost one game before that run. They've lost 5 overall. So in the last 6 games they've played, they've lost 4 of their 5 games that they've lost all season. So Fiorentina struggling a little bit, and they were absolutely flying. Moise Keane, I think it was, who was scoring freely for them. One of the sort of underrated bits of sort of, what would you call it, news, quizzical knowledge from Serie A currently is Juve, the old lady, sort of arguably one of the biggest teams historically in Italy and sort of controversially for many reasons. Juve sit in 5th place, having not lost a single game. They're currently unbeaten, Juve, or Drove, as my manager calls them, because they have won 8 and drawn 13 games, and often it's from winning positions. They draw these games. They get into winning positions and then they just drop it and lose it all. So Juve, Serie A, still showing some real excitement. Atalanta 7 points off Napoli at the moment, but honestly, the way that this league is shaped up so far this year, that could all chop and change. Next up, we're going to look at the Bundesliga, and bad news: Harry Kane could win a trophy. There you go, said it. It'd be a disaster. I mean, realistically, actually, before the next World Cup, if Harry Kane got into the vein of winning trophies, that would be lovely, because it'd be lovely for England to bring it home, especially from the USA would be awesome. In fact, I'm going to try and get out to the... I've never been to the USA before. I'm going to try and get out for that World Cup. Just got to save all my pennies. But yes, Bayern Munich are currently first, with Bayer Leverkusen underneath them in second, 4 points behind, and then Eintracht Frankfurt. Again, a little bit of a surprise team who have come up through the ranks this season. They're sitting in third, but admittedly they are 9 points off of Bayern Munich. So it's a bit of a 2-horse race at the moment between Munich and Leverkusen. Harry Kane is the top goal scorer. I mean, there's no massive surprise there. 16 goals for Harry Kane. Next up was Omar Mamouche, who I believe has just signed for Manchester City. He had 15 goals, so I can't believe they sold him, even for 50 million. Like, it beggars belief, quite frankly. And he was playing for... Was he playing for Frankfurt? He was playing for Frankfurt. So Frankfurt, who are in third, just lost their big striker. Like, that's a really stupid move, I'll be honest with you. If I was them, I'd refuse to sell him until the summer because they need all the firepower they can get. They've made a great Champions League run at the moment. They need to be pushing for that. And with their main striker, they've got to, absolutely. Towards the bottom of the table, though, I think the most incredible story is St. Pauli. Now, St. Pauli came up from the Zweite Bundesliga last year, and their manager, in fact, Hürsler, went off to Brighton. And everyone had them pegged to go down. They're 14th currently. They're actually in safety. Don't get me wrong, 17 points from 18 games, not good. But they're actually surviving currently. And if St. Pauli can survive in this league, I will be absolutely amazed. And I also know there's a podcast with a certain Ryan Hunn on it who would be over the moon if they survive too. Moving on from the Bundesliga, the La Liga table, Spain, and the big story here, Barca's drop-off in form. Barcelona were first and they were riding high, but now sit in third place, 7 points behind Real Madrid. I don't follow Barcelona that closely. Obviously, their problems with Dani Olmo and finances are well known throughout the world, but I'm not seeing what's happened to their form. But they've dropped off a lot. In the last 6 games, they've only won 1 game, sitting there with 39 points currently. Real Madrid, however, have started really hitting a rich vein of form. They're first with 46 points, closely followed by their capital rivals, Atleti Madrid. So the top 3 is who you would expect, just not necessarily in the order you would expect to have seen at the start of this season, because Barcelona were just on an absolute flyer. And weirdly, when you look at the top goal scorers, the 2 top goal scorers who have 27 goals between them are both Barca players. Robin Lewandowski with 16 and Rafinha with 11. Next up is Mbappe for Madrid, and then Vinicius Junior's, I think, 6th. So, it's quite remarkable, the sudden change in fortune that Barcelona have had. It's been a real surprise. I didn't realise it had changed that rapidly since I last looked. Also, quite shockingly, Valencia are currently in a relegation scrap. Now, Valencia are, obviously they had a horrific situation earlier this year with the floods, which was truly atrocious. But the team being in 19th place with 16 points from 20 games, that's not where you expect Valencia to be. You normally expect to see Valencia towards the top, not obviously challenging for the title, but towards the top, challenging for Champions League, Europa League places. Instead, Mallorca have taken their place. Mallorca have almost come from nowhere. Sociedad in 7th, not having the best year. Girona, who were brilliant last year, but obviously got ripped of all their players, in 8th. So yeah, the fact that Valencia are down in the bottom section there is a real surprise to see, actually. So, we can have a very quick look at Liga. PSG are top. What a surprise. 46 points. Olympique Marseille, 2nd on 36. Lille, 3rd. Lille probably doing better in the Champions League than they are realistically in the domestic league. But, it's exactly what you expect to see from the French league. It's probably, the Bundesliga was called a farmers' league for a long time, admittedly, because, Bayern Munich won everything all the time. But Liga is just where competition goes to die at the moment. So, and then, do you know what? To hell with it. Let's look at our table. We've done all the other European ones. We'll look at our table as things stand and look at the big stories. Manchester City are back in the top 4, and I think they're just going to continue to push. I'll be honest, I think they'll hit a real good vein of form. Newcastle in 5th after their defeat against Bournemouth. What a game that was, by the way. We talked about it on the Monday episode. And then the likes of Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton all in the relegation zone. It's really sad to see Ipswich got dominated against Manchester City. I really want to see them survive. What is great, though, Ipswich Town at 18th with 16 points. So that's the edge of the relegation zone. Tottenham Hotspur are 15th with 24 points. They're 8 points off the relegation zone. Tottenham Hotspur, 8 points off relegation. And on that happy note, we're going to end it. I've been your host, Josh Vince. Thank you so much for listening. Apologies, it's a slightly shorter one today, and it's a solo one. But like I say, we have incredibly busy schedules at the moment, considering it's January. So thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, share the pod around, give us a 5-star rating wherever you can, and we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, I've been Josh. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.